What was the stupid term they
Tempo
used?
tank.
The
Tempo
stupid,
tank.
yeah,
Tempo tank. Ramatra is our first tempo tank.
and we've never seen such a thing ever again. It's like, oh yeah, Mauga's a real tempo tank. The tempo of his guns firing, it's real fast.
You can fire left, you can fire right.
Yeah.
You can fire both. It's 3 tempos.
Hey folks, we're back. And as I said, before the end of the year. Isn't that something? Well, we're finally back to the usual topic. We're back to Overwatch. And for this event, I've brought back Ian. Because, he's really the only one who still plays the game. So, say hi, Ian.
Hello, everybody. This is Master Ian Gamer. Yeah.
Yeah. You honestly do more streaming than like YouTube videos at this point.
Yeah, it is interesting how much I've shifted towards streaming. And a lot of that's because there's like not as much stuff to make videos about,
Right.
So I just streaming. Plus, I branch out to like Fortnite and other games as well. So
yeah,
and that's easier to do via streams than videos.
Yeah, because algorithm hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've got some interesting topics today. We're recording this soon after the test trial for Hazard finished. So we're going to talk about that. And currently, the Overwatch Classic thing is still running, although by the time this video comes out, it probably will have ended. But we'll see. Anyways, and other than that, we're probably going to touch on 6v6 a little bit, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think the first thing we need to talk about is the new guy, Hazard.
Yes.
What do you think? There's a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, Hazard is a pretty fun hero, I'll be honest. My way of describing him basically is he feels like a better Doomfist.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like all around. I think he's more fun than Doomfist. I think he's stronger than Doomfist.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's more useful than Doomfist. He's more versatile than Doomfist. And yeah, that's the gist of him. I think in terms of just like a cool, fun new hero, Blizzard actually did a phenomenal job with Hazard.
Oh yeah,
he's really fun to play.
I totally agree. I kind of do agree. I think like, in a way, Hazard is almost them waving the white flag with Doomfist.
Yeah.
It's I don't know. I feel like they fucked up so bad with that rework. But yeah, Hazard is so interesting. Because he's not like tank Doomfist. Funnily enough, he's more like DPS Doomfist. He's very, at least the way I've played him, he's very sort of animation cancel heavy with his combos, which is right up my alley. And he's got a lot of depth to him. I don't think we've had a character with like this much depth since like, I don't know, how much depth would you say Venture has?
A decent amount. And Venture is an interesting comparison because Venture was also a hero who, when they were added, felt like a DPS Doomfist.
A bit, yeah.
In terms of their playstyle. I think Hazard has a lot more to him than Venture does in that regard, though.
Yeah, I would agree.
Like, obviously, there's a lot of like combos and fancy little things you can do with Venture, but I feel like Hazard is just more so of that.
Yeah, like I've already figured out, like, just by doing practice in the training range, like, there are situations where it's more optimal to animation cancel the fire into the melee, or in others where it's more optimal to cancel the melee into the fire. Like, there's all sorts of tiny little minutia details that I love. It was funny. I was watching one of your streams the other day, and I mentioned, like, how excited I am for like the rollouts and stuff. And you mentioned like, oh yeah, you know, I'm not really into, you know, these play styles where you set up perfectly for this rollout, and you know it takes like 2 minutes to set up, and the enemy steps two steps to the right, and you miss, and you fuck up and die. And I was like, if I can have that again, I'm all for it. Give it back to me. I am all here for setting up a rollout for 2 minutes that I use the enemy steps 2 steps to the right, and I die for it. Like, I'm about it. I love it. If that's what Hazard gives me again, I'll play Hazard. I'm probably going to play Hazard a decent bit already, but like, if he really ends up having that level of depth, like the way that like you can roof surf, if he's able to do that sort of thing, which I imagine he probably is, then yeah, like sign me up. He's got so much potential to him, but. I don't know. I feel like we should maybe actually start breaking down this character, other than just like broad statements about, oh my god, he's Doomfist, but again. So I don't know. Where do you want to start?
I guess we can start with just like his kit and everything, his abilities.
Okay. Yeah. In that case, I suppose we'll just go through each of his buttons. His primary fire. I'm not gonna lie, I think it's probably the most underwhelming part of his kit. It's not bad, and it feels decently good to use. But I don't know. I feel like they could have put more weight behind it. But then again, the rest of his kit is so interesting that, you know, having a kind of bland primary fire, just another tank with a shotgun, I suppose, isn't that bad.
Yeah, I think the primary fire is the weakest part of his kit, both in terms of like in-game power and design-wise. Because again, yeah, another tank with a shotgun, on top of that, a projectile shotgun, like not the most original weapon for a tank hero.
No, definitely not.
Power-wise, yeah, it feels so weak, but like overall, I don't think that's really an issue, because I think it's like it has to be weak because the rest of his kit is very strong. So like, you know, they need to like reduce the power somewhere in his kit to compensate. They went with the primary fire. And I feel like it can feel kind of bad at times trying to kill someone with it, and it's like you're shooting them and they just don't die. But like it's part of the balancing of this kit that it's that weak. So I don't really have an issue with it personally, but it does just kind of feel like his weakest ability.
Oh yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's absolutely his weakest ability. I think the one thing I would do is that I think I would increase its power, but like not much at all. Like, I'm talking like it does like what, 67 damage or some weird number like that. Like,
yeah,
I would just put it to 70. Like, I feel like 3 more damage would be something. It would at least like make the like sort of edge cases where like the enemy gets away with 1 HP feel a little less miserable, because like I had some of those for sure. Whereas like, why does this do exactly 67 instead of 70? Like, they walked away with 2 HP. Even though I like hit it accurately, it was, yeah. But I agree. I think there needs to be something in his kit that is underwhelming, just because he has a big kit. And so, yeah, something had to give. And I think the primary fire being the least interesting part of his kit is probably the right move to make that the weakest part. I will say, I kind of... You can tell me what you think, but I think, especially with the primary fire, they could have gone stronger with the crystals. Like, the feel of the crystals, right? Because, like, I don't know, it doesn't distinctly feel like you're firing crystals at people with that primary fire. It just feels like a regular shotgun. Like, it doesn't feel really all that different from using, like, old Roadhog primary fire. So I don't know. I feel like even just something more visually interesting being done with the crystals would have been cool.
I don't know that I agree per se. I think the sound design of the weapon, conveying it being like a crystal gun, they did a really good job with. I think the sound design for him overall is phenomenal.
Yeah, that
as
I
it
agree
basically always is.
Yes.
Maybe visual wise, there could be some more interesting stuff they do with it. Honestly, I just like, I was noticing just the detail of his primary fire with the whole crystal theming, and like, there's a lot of cool details with it, because, you know, like, the crystals themselves are made from the vanadium that he stole from Oasis.
Yeah.
And like, on the gun, there's like a little like gauge container that, like, when his ammo is full, is filled, and then as he shoots, it like depletes down until the little vial is empty, and then he does like the reload thing and like shoots a bunch more vanadium in to refill it. So like, little details like that, I feel like, are why, to me, like, the primary as like a crystal type weapon feels interesting, because there's a lot of little like visual details I think they did a good job with to signal it. In terms of like firing it and firing like crystals as opposed to firing shotgun scrap like Roadhog, I don't know. Like, I don't know how they really would like change it or do something differently to make it more crystal-esque, like you're saying.
I mean, obviously, you know the comparison I'm going to make that I think would have made it more interesting. Like, it's purple crystals. Like, they or pink, really. They honestly, it didn't even have to actually work like a needler. I think it just would have been interesting if, like, it shows the needles, like the crystals being stuck in the target for a moment. Like, that would have been interesting. Because we kind of don't really have that besides Hanzo, do we? Like, you can see the projectile lodged in the opponent. And I mean, they're giant crystals.
That's a good point. I'm pretty sure you can see the crystals if they hit the wall, the same way like a Torbjorn rivet will, you know, be stuck in the wall. But yeah, I don't think either Torbjorn or Hazard, their projectiles actually like stick in people, that you can visually see it the same way Hanzo's arrows work. I may be wrong, because I've never like deliberately looked for that, but yeah, that's an interesting thing to bring up. I'd never thought about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it would just be kind of interesting, because, like, obviously, he doesn't actually have a needler as much as I would have loved that. It certainly would have been more interesting than just a shotgun. But I think one of the coolest things about the needler is, like, even if the needles don't super combine and explode if you get enough in someone, like, they still like lodge themselves in the opponent, and then after a second, like, explode and do a tiny bit of damage, which is just interesting. Like, it almost wouldn't matter if it didn't do a ton of damage. Like, it could literally be, the crystals get lodged in the opponent, and then after 3 seconds, each one does 2 damage. Like, whatever. But I don't know. I feel like it'd be interesting. It feels like they could have given more flavor to the primary fire.
I agree, it could have been more interesting. I think a needler type thing would be cool to see, but in the case of Hazard, I just feel like he doesn't need it,
Right.
It's the same way it was like, Ilari's melee. She's swinging a big ass sword and it does the same as if this dainty little ninja just slaps you. Like, it's like the idea that like these crystals should do more than they do in game through like some needler type explosion thing is like, that would be cool, but it's not very necessary for the hero's kit, especially considering the rest of his kit and how much he has going on.
Although, if I'm correct, actually, I think his melee does do more damage than normal.
His does not.
Does it not? For some reason, I thought
only if you're using the leap and slash.
Oh yeah,
the slash does a lot more damage.
Of course,
the default melee does not.
For some reason, I thought he did 40. I don't know where I got that from.
Yeah, everybody does 40 now. That's since the health buff that they had in Season 9.
Oh, that's why. Okay. Yep, that explains why. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that answers that question. Okay, so that's his primary fire. I think... I don't know. Do you want to do the leap first, or the wall, or the secondary?
Let's talk about the leap.
The leap? Okay.
Yeah. I think the leap is like his strongest ability in a sense.
Yes. I think it's definitely his most central ability. I think the rest of his kit is centered around his ability to jump. Even like the way it plays with the wall, it definitely is reliant on the jump, or at least it's complemented by the jump. I don't know. I feel like at the same time the jump doesn't feel as big as you think it does, but it's also like it's no Winston leap, but it is still like a pretty good jump.
And comboing it with his short wall climb he has is like makes it more or less as versatile as a Winston leap.
Yeah, and doing the jump resets the wall climb, which is a really interesting tech. I really like that. I don't know. Are there any numbers yet on exactly how far he can go?
In terms of distance, I don't know. I haven't looked into it. I'm sure somebody's documented it at this point.
Okay.
Just from my practice range,
right.
But like I don't know what it is.
Because I know for sure you can go 20 meters. Because I've tested that. But I don't know if that's the maximum. It's not like Winston or anything where you can go like 30 meters. It's nothing like that. But it's good. And I think the slash is really interesting. I think especially the way that it allows for bunny hop extensions is really interesting, but we'll get to that. So the slash, how much does it do? I think it does 80?
80. I believe it's 80 damage.
Yeah, and it knocks them back a bit. I have one... overall, I love this ability. I have one nitpick. And this is going to sound really strange. My one nitpick is I wish you could disable being able to activate the slash with the melee button.
Interesting. Okay.
So the reason for that, though I would prefer it if the only way that you, if you choose to do so, the only way you would be able to activate the slash is just by hitting the ability button again, because if you're not able to activate through the melee button, it actually makes animation cancels easier. That's it. That's sort of like my one nitpick. I wish that I would be able to shut off being able to press it through the shift, because it makes like frame specific animation cancels a little less annoying. I feel like the hitbox on it is kind of huge, but that's sort of like fine, I guess. I don't have much else to say about that.
I would say the hitbox is long and not huge per se. Like, I think it's more of like, because like it's easy to like miss a target if you're like on top of them and try to do the slash, and you're just like a little to the side, you'll just like miss them with it, which I think is fair. Like means you have to aim it more precisely, but like the range on it is crazy. Like there are a few instances where just clearly I didn't physically hit them with like the actual mantis scythe blade that came out, but I still like hit them and they took the damage, and it was like, that is a big range on that.
Yeah. Honestly, I feel like it would almost be interesting if like the blade got like a little bit longer during the swipe, just like to show the hitbox a bit better, but I don't think it's necessary. I don't know, do you really have anything else to say about it? Because I mean, kind of
I mean, I think it's like super strong just because like the number of times you can just sort of lunge in and finish someone, because 80 damage is crazy. And just like, I don't know, it's weird how like in essence the simplest mechanic of his kit feels the strongest. And I guess it very much ties into what is technically a separate ability of his, which is like the wall climb and the mantling, which is a weird ability to have on a hero like him, but feels so good.
Oh yeah, it's so good. I think the simplicity of the leap is honestly kind of part of what's nice about it, because it's simple enough that it's honestly, it actually is kind of like Doomfist, old Doomfist in that way, where the thing about old Doomfist is that in of themselves, Doomfist's old abilities were extremely simple. It was you uppercut, you slam, and you punch things. But there was so much depth to like how you could use each of those. And like the sort of like tech that you could do if you turn correctly at like the end of a punch to punch around a corner, or you could look directly upwards while activating the slam midair to get like the more powerful version of it. It's sort of the same vibe I'm getting with the slash, because of how you're able to turn, because like the slash itself has another like forward movement associated with it, like it changes your momentum. And so I think something really interesting about the jump and the slash is that like you can jump and then you can decide to slash in a different direction, which will take you in that direction, which has a lot of potential. And as I said, he has the whole thing where you can bunny hop after landing and still be able to slash for a second there, which is also really big for like changing your trajectory. Like, for example, if you want to like land behind the enemy tanks and or I guess one tank, if you want to land behind the enemy tank and push them forwards, though, you can bunny hop, turn, and slash, which is really valuable control. So yeah, a simple ability, a lot of depth to it. I love it.
Something I've been wondering about, sort of talking about the mechanics of just like the mobility aspect.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe this is almost like getting like too tangential off topic, but
that's what we do here.
What do you think about the idea of giving every single hero a mantle ability?
Oh,
as just a base form of mobility.
You mentioned this during
not even the short wall climb that Hazard
Mantling.
has. Just mantling. Like if you're eye level with a like flat surface in front of you, you can climb up onto it.
Well, a lot of FPS games do that.
Yes.
They have that already. But I think that it could work, but they would have to make it not look weird. Like that's sort of my thought on it. Like, could it work? Sure, I guess. I wouldn't have any problems with it. But like, how are you gonna make that not look weird with Orisa?
Right. That is one of the issues.
That's sort of like my only thought on it. I would have no problem with that. It's but it would just like seeing Orisa or Bastion or honestly even like Mercy do it would look kind of weird. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it would be weird, but the thing is, it's like it just feels so good because like it was so funny. I think it was yesterday I was playing again after Hazard wasn't in the game anymore. And I played a ton of Hazard over the weekend.
Yeah, you
I was
did.
playing Winston, and I leaped because I was trying to like jump up to grab like attack someone on a ledge like a widow or something.
Mm-hmm.
And my leap came just short.
Oh,
and
yeah.
for the briefest moment, like the muscle memory of like, okay, I'm just gonna climb up onto the ledge took over.
Wasn't there?
And then I just slid down the wall, and there's like an instant of like, what? And I was like, oh yeah, Winston can't do that.
like a bird flying into glass.
Yeah, it was like this and it's not even like I jumped with the intention of wall climbing. It's just once I realized I was falling short, I was like, okay, I'll just climb up and then attack. And you couldn't. I was like, man, Winston would just feel so much better.
Yeah,
if he could do that.
Honestly, I think even if what the idea was behind it is that any character with a leap ability can like do a mantle, that would I think that'd be fine. Like if Doomfist does it, that makes sense. It's Doomfist, or like Winston, that would make sense, or even like Lucio, that would make sense. But like when you have low mobility characters like Roadhog and Orisa, and like characters that aren't particularly athletic in like how they're portrayed, like Moira or Mercy, like it's like it would look weird. So I'm not going to say I don't think it would work for every character, but I think it's more likely that they would give it to select characters.
Yeah, it'd be like a situational type thing, which like, yeah, I don't know. That's almost an interesting idea, because like I was thinking of it in the way they did like the season 9 like health changes, like hitbox changes, just like a sweeping change. But like, what if there's just a season where they're like, all right, we're gonna reassess like, and like give a handful of the characters this sort of mantle ability. Characters like Winston, Doomfist would probably get it as well.
Soldier would 100% get it.
Soldier, yeah. And there's probably a bunch that could do it. Like even Lucio, maybe.
Yeah,
like,
Lucio,
as a way
100%.
If that could like simplify his wall riding in a sense, maybe they could work it into his kit.
Give Ness a single reason to glance this game's way again. Yeah, I mean, we could go over like the entire roster and like try and break that down, but I think that's more likely. Because I don't know, Moira just does not seem like the type of person who is like training to do vaulting things. I don't know. She doesn't strike me as that sort. So
yeah,
I think for some characters it would make sense. And I would be curious to see if they did it. Speaking of which, though, we should probably actually talk about the like wall climb and vault on Hazard himself. It's weird, but it's really cool, and it feels really good. I remember getting into the training range and being like, I can probably make that if I do it correctly. And like, I could do it. I could scale that if I did it correctly, especially if I did the reset with the jump. It feels great.
Yep. It really does. And it ties in perfectly with the next ability of his, I guess we could talk about, is the Crystal Wall.
Yeah.
Probably my favorite ability in his kit.
I would say it's probably my second favorite ability in his kit. But yeah, I feel like it's maybe tied with the leap. Yeah, it's probably tied with the leap, because my favorite is his guard.
Okay.
But I'd say it's tied for second place with his leap. Because they kind of go together. It's a very interesting sort of thing to see again. Like, I don't think anyone was expecting another Mei to ever happen. What's kind of funny is that people always make the joke, oh, Mei should be a tank. Well, here's a tank that throws up Mei walls. So, yeah, it's a super interesting ability, especially the way that it has a lingering hitbox on it. Like if you touch it again, it does damage still, and it knocks you away. That has so much disruption ability, and it's honestly more disruptive than a wall almost, than a Mei wall.
Oh yeah.
It just doesn't it doesn't cover the same amount of space, which I think is kind of the trade-off. It's not as durable, and it doesn't cover the same amount of space. It's also not as tall, but yeah, the way that like things will, like, enemies will bounce off of the thing, so it's really hard to like get over it even with mobility. Really valuable, and as his trailer shows, you can like slash someone into the wall and have them bounced back at you, and like that's crazy combo potential. So like, again, this thing has so much depth to it. It can set up so many different things, and the easiest version of his kill combo basically involves throwing a wall behind the person you're diving. I think it's cool. I mean, what else do you have to say about it?
Basically that. I love it. It's like Mei Wall, as you said, but the versatility of it is incredible. Like, you can use it for mobility to help you climb to like a higher position, even though realistically I've found that's, given the rest of his kit with the you don't need it for that. And then I'll get to this in a second. The fact that it's so disruptive, fire it into the enemy ranks, and it's like, oh, you just deny that specific area for however many seconds it's up. Like,
I think it's 4
seconds,
or
4 or 5 seconds.
Because it's on a 12-second cooldown.
Yeah.
Totally. But by the time it's broken, because the cooldown starts when you place it, I think it's at 5 seconds. I believe 5 or 6 seconds.
Okay. So yeah, you can fire it into the enemy ranks and just disrupt in there. You can use it like a Mei wall to like isolate, if the Reinhardt pushes up and it's in like a choke, throw the wall behind. It won't cover as widely as a Mei wall, but it'll cover enough to disrupt the healers from being able to get line of sight in time for your team to take out the Rein. It's a good defensive ability where it's like, oh, you're caught in like an open position, like your positioning is bad or whatever. Shoot down the crystal wall. You'll buy yourself a little window where you can't get sniped or shot to sort of reassess, have a healer come in and support you, get your cooldowns back so you can leap out of that position. There's so much versatility to it. It can be used in so many different ways, and I love it. It covers all these different bases for him. But one of the issues that I think I'm going to have with it is I feel like it's going to fall into the same pitfall as Lifeweaver's pedal platform, where it has a ton of versatility, but then 90% of the time ends up becoming like a personal escape tool.
I see. Okay.
Or like Lifeweaver, it's like all these cool things you can do with it. You can use it to help people get to high ground. You can use it to, screw up the enemy Orisa's ultimate. You can use it to have all these funky interactions with things. 90% of the time, you see it used for a Lifeweaver to save themselves and only themselves when they're getting dove by someone.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, at the same time, though, I think that's almost like a skill expression thing, where it's like, because you and I both know very well how a good Lifeweaver uses that platform, and it is not just to save themselves. Like a really good hazard is going to find some freakish, no pun intended, some freakish ways to use that thing. Especially since like there's no range limit on it.
Oh my god, yeah.
Like the trade-off is that it's a projectile that can be deflected and eaten and blocked, unlike Maywall. But like it has no range limit, and it protrudes in any direction. You can stick it on walls, on ceilings, on anything. Like you can stick it on the bottom of a moving platform. You can stick it on the payload. It's just it does everything. The downside of it is that it's just not that big, which I mean is not that big of a downside, and it also doesn't have much health. I think it only has 300 health, but
yeah, I think the health is the other big thing. I wish it was stronger. I feel like it's a little too easy to break.
Really?
Yeah. Because, like, you throw that down, it just gets, like, shattered if people focus it.
That's interesting.
Which, like, overall, I can't say that he, like, needs the extra, like, power in his kit of a stronger wall. I'm sure we'll get more into this when we talk about his block ability. I wish they took some of the power from his block and put it into his crystal wall. Namely being, give the wall more health. I think it's a big thing I would like to see.
Okay, yeah, I see what you mean. Although I feel like it would almost be just because of how disruptive the thing is. I feel like they could increase the health and increase the cooldown by like 2 seconds, and it'd be fine. It's the sort of thing you should probably only really be using once per fight, anyways, or else this thing's gonna get obnoxious. So, well. Then again, I don't really care if things are obnoxious in this game, but it's unless it's Widowmaker. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like if they wanted to increase the health, they probably could just slightly increase the cooldown, and it wouldn't make that big of a difference. But I guess I see what you mean about the block, which I suppose we should actually talk about now. Yeah, that thing's my favorite ability that he has. It's so interesting. I know that people are like, oh, it's another tank that just like blocks damage like Doomfist or Ramatra. But the way that you can combine it with his other abilities, and the fact that it has like the auto aim, like hit things in front of you, is so interesting. Because basically what it does is that it makes him a dive anti-dive tank. Like, think about it. You try and dive his backline, he turns around, and he just, like, holds up his arm, and suddenly, the enemy tracer who's just dove your backline now has a million needles being flung at her. And, like, she can't dodge them. It's really interesting. I don't know. I think it's the best feeling ability that he has, especially since you can use it so often. So, I don't know. What do you think?
I very much disagree. The block is my least favorite part of his kit. And that is because it feels functionally redundant with what I wish the crystal wall did. I wish the bulk of his defensive, like, capabilities lay in, like, his own sort of strength and, like, health pool and the crystal wall. I get the dynamic of the crystal wall and the block playing together, and they do play together very well. But I think he's suffers from just having, like, a lot of different things in his kit. Not terribly so, but, like, I would like to see his kit be a bit simpler in terms of the tools there. And I feel like the block is the thing that feels the most... It feels the least fitting in terms of, like, what I want this hero to be. The block, it works. It fits. It's a unique twist on the block in that it deals the damage in front as he's blocking. Interestingly, I find it most effective, maybe not most effective, but, like, surprisingly effective as just, like, a finisher.
Oh, yeah.
Where it's like you dive in, slash, don't quite finish them off. Rather than trying to land a primary, you just block for half a second and deal a bit of damage to finish off the Mercy or whatever. Which is an interesting application for it. But, like, I like the crystal wall so much that I wish the power of the block was just invested into the crystal wall.
Okay, I see what you mean. Yeah. So are you talking more about, like, how it's not very new, or is it more just like is it like an issue with the ability itself more, or is it more an issue with, like, just you don't like it in combination with the wall? Like, which one is it more?
I think it's just the ability. It's like, yeah, it's definitely not new. Yeah, seeing another block ability on a tank hero like this isn't terribly exciting. I'll acknowledge they did a unique twist with the crystals that shoot. Like, I can appreciate that. But I feel like the crystal wall is such a cool and unique element of this hero that I want to see them do more with that. And it feels like the crystal wall is being undermined by the fact that he also has a block ability. And it's like, I want his crystal wall to be the main cool thing you do alongside his mobility. Because blocks are fundamentally just kind of boring. And this one especially, because it has an auto aim, which, like, technically isn't even really an auto aim. It's more of just like an AoE.
Yeah.
But, like, visually it's presented as an auto aim.
It's like old Symmetra primary fire, where technically it was an AoE, but people all thought it was an auto aim.
But, like, this one even can just hit everybody. So, like, it's basically just an AoE in front of him. And, like, I just don't find the ability satisfying to use in that way. It's like, yes, it's good for finishing things. Yes, he takes less damage and it can save your life a lot of the time by blocking in a certain position. But there's also a lot of times where you're just sort of standing there, poking at the enemy hazard while they're standing there poking at you. And just, like, scenarios like that are just so uninteresting compared to the rest of his kit.
Well, to be fair, remember who you're talking to. I am the guy who was, like, absolutely over the moon about the idea, like, when Ramatra came out, that two Ramatras could ult and block at each other and just stare at each other indefinitely and do damage. I thought that was peak Overwatch. Like, that was hilarious to me. I love that shit. So, like, I suppose I'm already kind of predisposed to liking a character who kind of sits there, installs, and does some damage, and just stares at each other. I find some comedy in that. But yeah, I mean, I think your concern about the block undermining the wall, I think that's something we're going to have to actively see going forward, because I think depending on how they decide to balance him, I think will say a lot about how much it's actually undermining or not undermining. Because, like, I agree. If it gets to the point where he's just, like, he's got way too much defensively going on, even for a tank, and we start to see them, like, kind of whittling away at one or the other, I think I'll agree with you. Yeah, it's probably too much going on with both, and one is undermining the other. But I don't know. I think it's something that's going to have to kind of we're going to have to wait to see, in a sense.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's just I find the crystal wall so much more interesting of an ability that, like, I hate seeing it have to share a hero, basically.
Yeah.
A boring ability like a block with an auto aim, like that. It's like I wish they could just make a crystal wall.
Yeah,
because that's so much fun.
To be fair, I completely understand. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say that the block is his most complex or really interesting move. Like, his most interesting move is the wall. It's like it's the wall and, like, kind of tied with the jump. I'm not going to deny that. Yeah, I mean, I understand what you mean. I think that as the most complex part of his kit, it definitely deserves to have a lot of spotlight put on it, because it's definitely sort of the most unique thing in his kit. But yeah, as I said, we'll just have to see. I think the way that they balance him going forwards on the defensive side of things will kind of tell us a lot. But yeah, that's his block. And other than that, we have his ultimate, and I guess we can maybe talk about his health pool briefly, but let's talk about his ultimate first. It is a wacky ultimate, and I love it. It's just like Junkrat Trap, but, like, in AoE. It's sick. It's like it's what Ramatra's Vortex should have been. It just pulls things out of the air. It's so cool.
I do really like it. It's a very unique twist on, like, just that type of ultimate, because, like, I'm honestly impressed they came up with something as unique as that, even though it's functionally just like a Reinhardt shatter.
Yeah.
But then it has the element of Ramatra's Vortex, as you said, where it pulls things down, and it's more of a root as opposed to a hard stun, and it goes through walls and stuff like that. Yeah. But, like, I feel like overall the power level of it is kind of weak. It's very easy to dodge,
yes.
Which I think we're going to see it get buffed. Maybe not as soon as he launches, but I think as time goes on, we're going to see it get buffed, because especially as people get more used to the ultimate and used to him as the hero they're playing against, people are only going to get better at dodging it.
Right.
And already in the trial weekend, like by the end of the weekend, it was hard to root more than, like, one person with a use of it, because people know it's coming. They know how to deal with it. It doesn't matter if it goes through walls. They can just dodge it. Like, it's like a Hanzo strike almost with, like, the dragons, where it's like, yes, you can get it in a nice position that, like, roots a bunch of people, but a lot of the time people just get out of the way. And maybe that's all they want it to be. Maybe they want it to be more an area denial thing, and they don't even want the ultimate to necessarily always root people, because there's still utility and just forcing people to move so they don't get rooted.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, it also does 90 damage, which is nothing to scoff at.
Yeah.
But I mean, as the joke goes, zoning ultimate, you know, like, it's like, you use Deadeye, it's a zoning ult. Just, you know, you fucked it up, but just say it's a zoning ult. Yeah, I mean, I guess they could go that direction. I'm not really sure what they could buff about it, though. Like, what would you think? What are you thinking of?
Maybe just, like, the area of it, but, like, you gotta be careful, because you can't just have it be, like, too big of an AoE, because that's just unreasonable.
Yeah.
Maybe the speed at which it deploys, I think, could be something they look at.
Yeah. I
think that's probably the biggest thing, because, like, you hear him fire it off. You have, like, a solid, I don't know how long it is, but it feels like a lot of time.
About 3/4 of a second.
Get out of the
probably.
way.
Yeah.
Either get out of the way, angle your shield or defense matrix up to block it, Suzu, Zarya bubble. Like there's so many things that counter it is the other thing. And given how telegraphed of an ability is, it's just like Ryan Shatter is just quick.
Yeah.
It's like hammer down. And it's like, yes, you can counter it with a lot of things, but the speed at which you need to react in order to counter it is what makes it like a good dynamic.
Right.
Downpour, just the window feels too big.
Yeah. Honestly, I understand what you're saying. It almost feels like it has the same issue as Bastion's new ultimate, Artillery. Because, like, we all know how bad Artillery is. It's not a good ultimate.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the same thing, I guess. It suffers that same issue. It's also the same issue as Meteor Strike, even with old Doomfist. The problem with Meteor Strike is that, you know, people could get out of the way. It's pretty telegraphed. It doesn't have the same ultimate issue as Meteor Strike, where, like, using it is going to get you killed, or, like, old Bastion tank form where, you know, usually using it got you killed. It's at least not like that. But yeah, it's definitely exhibiting similar issues. I think another thing that could be interesting to change is, and this might be controversial, but I think what might be interesting to change is, like, the ability to stun him out of it. I think it would be interesting if, you know, after like the needles leave his back, he can die. The things will still land. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, as long as the Q button is pressed, the needles will land. Because there is definitely also sort of a risk aspect to it, because it does leave you kind of wide open. So that's sort of my thoughts on it. It's a good ultimate. I think it's fun. We'll have to see if they have to buff it, because it's, you know, telegraphed, like super heavily telegraphed. I actually did kind of have a funny interaction one night, one of the nights I was playing it, where I was playing Sigma, and I was like, oh shit, barrier, there's a cooldown on it, right? I can't deploy it immediately after I call it. And I was like, oh yeah, kinetic grasp, just look straight upwards. Yeah, that was it. So I figured that out quick. Yeah, so that's his ultimate. How expensive is it? How expensive is the ultimate? Like, not the numbers, because the numbers are very contextual to the rest of the hero, but, like,
yeah,
how long would you say it actually takes to charge?
I'd say it's like in the middle. Like, it doesn't charge quickly by any means, but it's also not like a Zarya grab where it, like, takes forever.
Right.
It's a pretty moderately sped. However, whatever word you would use to terminology,
yeah.
It moderately charges in that regard.
Right. So it's not graviton surge, but it's also not pulse bomb. Yeah. Yeah, I'd say like, especially among tank ultimates, it's pretty middle of the pack. It's definitely more expensive than Whole Hog, at least in, like, how long it takes. I don't know. I feel like the closest is probably, like, not, well, they've changed Diva Bomb too many times for me to remember how
I would say, yeah,
charges.
it's about a Diva Bomb charge time.
Yeah. Okay. So that's about right. Yeah. Okay. And it's about it's more effective than a Diva Bomb. So, you know, it ain't 2016 anymore. People don't die to that thing.
Yeah.
No. So then we have his health pool. I think we should just talk about this briefly. I've heard some people say it's too big. What do you think?
It might be. It might be a little too big. I think, if anything, he has too much armor.
Mm-hmm.
If they were to shift some of his armor into health, which is something they've done a ton of times with tanks over the years, I think that's more than likely what we'd see them change about it if they do decide to nerf it, which I wouldn't be surprised if they nerf his health.
Right, because I think what he had was, 300 HP... No, 400 HP, 200 armor or something like that?
250 armor, I think. Because he's a total of 650.
Oh, he's a total of 650. Okay. So 250 armor. Okay, yeah. I mean, I could see them make it 200, yeah. Or even like 175. Yeah, okay. That I can see that. I don't really have much to comment on though there. I just knew that people were talking about it, so I figured I'd ask.
Yeah.
Beyond that, let's talk about the guy. Him, the guy, like the character.
The man himself.
The design of him, like what he's actually like, his character in the lore. I don't know. I feel like part of me really likes him. The other part is just like, why is there a Scottish Edgerunners character in Overwatch? There's an angel on each shoulder whispering different things in my ear about this. It's yeah. I think that he's a kind of bland design. I don't disagree with that. Especially after some of the designs that they showed as being like concept for him. Some of that shit went crazy, and I think I would have preferred it. But I think what we got is fine. It's just sort of, he's just a cyberpunk character, which isn't terrible. It's not necessarily bad, but I think what kind of makes it different in Overwatch is like, Overwatch is kind of just cyberpunk, but the world isn't shit. So it's like, I don't know, he doesn't feel that different. Whereas like a character like Sigma is like, what the hell? Why is there an Eldritch Horror guy in my, robot future shooter game? He doesn't really stand out like that. But what do you think? In terms of his design, I mean.
I agree. He does feel uninteresting. Because, right, the issue... He definitely does just feel like a cyberpunk character. And an uninteresting cyberpunk character at that. And in the context of the Overwatch universe, everything is already just cyberpunk by default.
Yeah.
So like half the roster has some sort of implant or cybernetic limb or something. So like that's not inherently interesting in the context of Overwatch. And he just doesn't have anything that makes up for that otherwise, other than the crystals. The crystals are like the one unique, interesting part of his design, which I do like. But I think it was catastrophic that they introduced him pre-crystals with like the trailer and then the origin story that basically all is set before he gets the crystals, because that is a terrible look for the character without the crystals.
Yeah, I mean,
he just looks like a weird hulking guy.
Yeah.
Who like has a bunch of like augments and stuff, and it's like, okay, like this in the context of the Overwatch universe, this is as generic as they get.
Yeah, I agree. I think it would have been more interesting if the direction they went with the crystals was like, yeah, he has cybernetic implants, but like the crystals are part of him. I think that would have been more interesting. Like if instead of the crystals like coming out of like machines that are meant to like process the vanadium, like he literally just grows crystals out of himself. That I think that would have been more interesting.
Yeah, and that's getting very much onto the expectation versus what we got. Because, of course, with all the teasers of, like, the Moira experiments and, like, the freaks and mutants and whatnot, that was what we were expecting this hero to be. To be a human crystal, maybe even animal turtle hybrid freak. And he's just not. Yeah, it's just a guy with cybernetics, and the cybernetics harness the crystal. Like, even his mantis scythe blade that he gets when he has his leap.
Yeah.
Even that, you can see on his arm, there's like a little like port, basically, that it grows out of.
Yes.
Never mind the fact the arm is cybernetic as well, basically. At least from the hand down. Maybe probably where the thing, the port is. But it's like, yeah, it's like a machine that just like harnesses crystals and grows them, which is a lot less interesting than the freakish nature of a human with crystals growing out of them. Like, I 100% agree. They went with just the most like boring tech route for it when they could have played it in such a different, more interesting direction. And like, I guess you could argue the cybernetics are him. They're his limbs. They're his body at this point.
Yes, that's true.
So like, to that extent, maybe it's the same as if it was literally growing out of his skin. And like, they show in the trailer that like, oh, you can't use it. We don't know how stable it is. We don't know what'll happen. And then he seems to be like going through some sort of pain when like he infuses it and starts growing the crystals. But yeah, it falls flat when it's like, oh, but he's just using cybernetics to grow the crystals. It's not like it's shooting out of his back through some like impromptu on the spot mutation, which would have been so much cooler.
It's not like
so much more visceral.
Yeah, it's not like Wolverine.
Instead, it's just yeah, exactly. Yeah, Wolverine's a great comparison to that, where it's like he could have been like Wolverine, and instead he's just a man with a suit that makes crystals. In essence.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Basically, yes. I don't know. I feel like it's true that when you have a universe where prosthetics and like replacing body parts with robotic ones is that common, it almost it's too easy to kind of get lost in like the like how absurd can you make it thing, like, because at some point everything is just like a fancily painted prosthetic that looks like an organic body part, right? And basically you can make that do as much crazy shit as you want. It's still a machine. But like, if you want, it's hard to get visceral with that. But if you want to get visceral, it kind of has to be like flesh and crystal. Like, it's just flesh on crystal, which they didn't do. Which, I mean, to some extent, I feel like that might be an age rating thing, if I'm going to be completely honest.
Maybe. Yeah, I've considered that. That's possible as well.
Because, like, I don't think they can have, like, Dark Souls style, like, you know, the crazy shit's growing out of the enemy and there's blood spurting everywhere. They can't really do that. But, yeah, it's, yeah, they could have done better. In terms of his character, though, it's, first of all, the British Air Force needs to get its shit together. We are 2 for 2. Like, the English pilot goes missing in a plane accident. The Scottish soldier, like, loses all his limbs in a plane accident. Like, the British Air Force needs to get their shit together. Yeah, so I don't know. I that's kind of all I have to say about it. It's not a terribly interesting backstory.
Yeah, I like his origin story. I think it taps on a lot of neat things. Like, obviously, there's a lot of like commentary about like veterans and stuff, which
Absolutely,
I think is a cool angle to take. And like, it makes him very likable and sympathetic.
Mm-hmm.
Up until the point he becomes a revolutionary punk, I would say. That's when I'm like, okay, I'm not interested anymore.
yeah. No,
personally, because like I'm just not a fan of the punk whole thing, and like, it's such an overdone like archetype in Overwatch at this point.
Yeah.
That it's like I see this cool origin story of like this guy who just had a shitty life growing up and is trying to make things better, and then just gets screwed over by just something completely out of his control, and is just treated so unfairly and just the way things play out. And then he's just broken, and then has to grow from that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's cool. I love it.
And then they go the punk route, and I'm like, okay. Well, you lost me.
To be fair, though, what direction would you have taken him instead?
That's the thing. I don't know what would have been a better direction. I think it makes sense he would go down that sort of path. But it does feel weird, too, because, like, I'm still trying to get a feeling for how old he is the other thing.
I think he's meant to be in his late 20s, is my understanding.
Okay.
That's I can't remember where I heard it from, but I believe he's supposed to be in his late 20s.
Like, he would have to be, because, like, if he was in his 30s, I think the whole punk angle would feel even worse, if you know what I mean, where it's like, he's a little old to be, like, that type of, like, boots on the ground revolutionary.
Oh,
just like running around causing, like, havoc, running amok. It's like,
you have not met the people I have.
Maybe.
People in their 50s like that. I've met plenty of them.
I guess, but it makes him less sympathetic, I think. I think it's easier to be sympathetic toward a younger character who fills that sort of archetype.
Yeah. No,
but
I get that.
We don't know exactly how old he is. Also, like, the voice and, like, the size of his character is, like, a whole separate thing as well. I don't know how much we need to talk about that.
I think I'll simply weigh in on it. I have no problem with it, because gaining muscle doesn't change your voice. So...
Okay. I've seen so many people, though, watch react to the initial trailer, and, like, as soon as they hear him speak, they're like, that voice is coming out of that body?
Yeah, I mean...
I've seen so many people say that, like, clearly that's an issue, I would say, in that the character isn't reading well if you have that many people immediately thinking that upon being introduced to the character.
Yeah, I suppose
the voice itself, I think, sounds great.
Yeah,
I think his voice is great. The voice acting for him is phenomenal, and the character, like, in that regard, is awesome. But I think there's unfortunately a weird disconnect between not only the voice, but, like, the tone and, like, the way he talks definitely feels very, like, young punkish.
Yeah.
And then you look at his body and, like, the role he's supposed to fill, and it's like, that feels a little incongruent there.
To be fair, though, like, it's not like that's like a fantasy thing. There are people who are huge who don't have deep voices. It's just like...
Sure.
It's just... It feels almost more realistic in a way, which is a funny thing to say about a half-robot guy who grows crystals out of his back. But it's... in a sense, it's kind of an interesting change of pace, because he's a enormous guy who doesn't sound like Arnold Schwarzenegger. It's like... It's kind of an interesting change of pace. I personally like it. But I understand that, like, people are going to have a disconnect. Which, to be fair, I think says more about the people having the disconnect than the character. But, yeah. I like it. I don't really have a problem with it. But I understand people do find a disconnect. What else can we talk about with him? Or have we kind of covered him?
I think we've probably covered him.
Okay. Well, in that case, yeah, that's Hazard. That's Hero 42, right?
I believe, yeah.
42. Which means that there are now as many added characters as there were characters at launch.
Yep.
That's pretty wild.
And speaking of characters at launch...
Overwatch Classic. Now, this is, I think, is actually going to be the more interesting conversation, because we have basically opposite opinions on this.
Mm-hmm.
So, who should start? Who should start? You or me?
I feel like you should start. You're the host.
Okay, fair enough. This is the most fun I've had in Overwatch in years. It's peak. It's stupid. It's goofy. It doesn't stress me out. I'm just sitting there in a corner as Bastion, mowing some guy down, or I'm playing Roadhog and I'm just kind of walking in there like, yeah, fuck you. Boop. Like, it's I don't know, it just feels better. It's not overwhelming, which is something I have a lot of problems with modern Overwatch. And I experienced this, like, very starkly with Hazard, because I would obviously have to go play regular Overwatch 2 to play Hazard. And, like, man, I felt it. I went from Overwatch Classic, where I was like, yeah, I'm having a good time. I could play a few more games of this. And then, like, I played 2 games of Overwatch 2, and I'm like, I have a headache. I'm like, my eyes are spinning. Like, I'm stressed out. I need to go, like, stand up and take a walk. It's like, it was night and day. So that's sort of my thoughts on it. I love Overwatch Classic, and it's taught me that the rose-tinted glasses are not actually all that tinted, at least for me.
Well, on the contrary, then I suppose, I played Overwatch Classic, and I hate it. It's awful. I'm the exact opposite of everything you just said. And not really though, because like I absolutely understand your perspective on it. But for me, I go into Overwatch Classic, and I'm like, everything in here feels worse. Half the heroes I enjoy just don't exist flat out. Mm-hmm. The other half are either unplayably trash, in the case of like D.Va, or just mechanically feel so much worse that I don't want to play them. And then I'm left with basically like, I can play Junkrat. And that's it. I play Junkrat or I play Widow, who I don't even normally play. But she's like so godly overpowered in this mode.
Oh yeah, it's horrific.
Like you just play her because yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
it's just
honestly, it almost sounds like a part of it might be that we just played different characters at the time.
That's definitely part of it. I've been paying attention very closely to a lot of people who talk about it. There's a lot of people like you who love Classic. I've noticed the people who love Classic seem to, by and large, be DPS players.
Really? I am not a DPS
player. Specifically people who really like to play Mei and Hanzo.
That makes sense.
And Widowmaker.
Yep.
And Genji.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I've noticed. I've not seen many tank players thrilled to be playing Classic. I've not seen many support players thrilled to be playing Classic.
Interesting. Because, like, what's funny is that I know for absolutely certain that, like, a lot of Bastion players are eating good. The Bastion community is very happy about this. The council has convened. We give it a thumbs up. And the same is true for Roadhog, because those are the two characters I played when the game first came out. Like the number, like, you know, streamers like Six, you know him. Yeah. He's been doing streams playing old Roadhog, and like I think he kind of captured it perfectly. He basically was saying, like, it's just simpler. It's like you don't have to overthink anything. It's like your concern is to land the hook. You know, you don't have to worry about, is my resource meter prepared? You know, do I have to put down the pig pen and like space it correctly? Because I mean, I know I sound like kind of almost hypocritical because of how much I love like old Doomfist and like how ridiculously complex old Doomfist was, and like Hazard. But I feel like a character like Roadhog really was always meant to just be a simple kind of guy. It's like, and like, no matter how much they've changed him over the years, it's always felt like the idea behind Roadhog is becoming less and less prevalent, and they're spending more and more time just trying to make him fit instead of trying to make him Roadhog, which is kind of what I feel about a lot of the characters they've reworked. And going back and being able to play old Roadhog, and it's just like, yeah, it's old Roadhog. The hook does preposterous things, and it sometimes doesn't even put the enemy where it's supposed to. Sometimes they end up behind you. Tough shit. Deal with it. And, you know, it's the take a breather is not very good, but, you know, don't worry about it. Just get out there and hook things more. And I'm not going to say that, like, it's perfect, because it's not. Like, obviously, I'm not going to say that Overwatch release day was the best patch that's ever existed. If you want my opinion on what the best patch that ever existed was, that was, like, mid to late summer 2017. I could get specific, but yeah, I don't think it's perfect. But I understand what you mean by, like, things feel slow. because it's true. It feels slower, but I think it's also a matter of you don't like that. I like that.
It is very much a difference of taste because, like, I've been following this a lot because I've been so fascinated with just like how this is playing out and people's different takes on it, and it is very. I want to say it's polarized, but I don't think it is that polarized because I don't think either side like particularly hates the other side.
No.
in
No.
this. It's just the people who like Classic are like, I love Classic, I want to play this forever, and the people who don't like Classic are like, this sucks. I'm gonna go back to normal Overwatch 2.
Yeah.
And then they just go their separate ways, which is like what I would ultimately want to see come out of this is like I would like to see some type of like permanent Classic mode.
Yes.
Because clearly there's just two different player bases of people. One enjoys one, the other enjoys the other. Why not just let both exist?
Yeah, no, exactly. That's actually exactly what I've been thinking. It's like they can continue doing their thing with Overwatch 2. And honestly, I'm more likely to play regular Overwatch 2 if Overwatch Classic is there.
Right.
Because the problem with Overwatch 2 right now is like, all I can do is get on and play Overwatch 2. I think I'll pass. I'll go play Deep Rock Galactic. But like, if it's like, I can go play Overwatch Classic. I could also just like put in a few matches in Overwatch 2, see how that's doing. That's something I would do. It's something I did do. I absolutely, when Classic first came out, I got onto Classic, played a few games. I was like, oh, this is the fucking best. I kind of do want to see what Overwatch 2 is like right now, though. And then I went and played Overwatch 2, and I was like, I'm stressed. I'm going to go play Overwatch Classic. But I did go play it. And I agree. I think having both would be the best solution. And I think they could even do really interesting things with Overwatch Classic. Like, they've already said they're thinking of this, spotlighting different patches throughout periods of Overwatch history. I know that at some point they mentioned they might actually do an alpha patch, the closed beta patch, which is the first one I played way back in 2015, where like Bastion had the shield and like the remote mine as his ult. That would be wild. But obviously I also would love to see Doomfists for reasons I've thoroughly explained throughout the previous hour of this recording. And I think they could even do things like make classic quote-unquote modes that are like, they weren't actually patches that ever existed, but they're patches that could have existed. So like, if like they decided to do things differently, so like maybe, for example, if you want to do something really kind of make everyone go crazy, how about we have, at the same time as Mercy has her mass res, we have Brigitte. Like, something insane like that. Like, they could do that. And just play around with it and like, switch it around periodically. And I think that would make so many people happy. It'd make me happy.
I feel like that's almost just getting into, like, the 6v6 realm at that point, where it's no longer classic. It's just, like, a weird, bizarro reimagining of, like, the old.
Yeah.
Which is an interesting idea. I wonder how like realistic them playing around with stuff like that would be, and like how big of an audience there'd be for that sort of thing.
Well, to be fair, I feel like this was an experiment to see if people would be interested in old Overwatch, and the experiment worked. Like, people are. And maybe the next step of it is like experimenting. Okay, what if we experiment with classic things that never actually existed but kind of feel classic? You know, they could.
Right. I think they'd have to be sort of careful with that, though, because a lot of the people who are into classic, I definitely get the sense, like it because it's old and familiar, and modern Overwatch by comparison. You know, let's say somebody stopped playing in like 2018 even, let's just say.
Yep.
And then they come back to Overwatch 2 today. They're like, I don't know who Kiriko is. I don't know who Sigma is. I don't know why I'm a DPS. Why is my health auto-regenning? Why are there only 5 players? There's so many like things that have changed that it's just a turnoff. They're like, I don't know what's going on. But then when you go back to a classic mode, it's like, oh yeah, I remember this. I know how to play this. I know what to do. I know how to play Mei. I know how to play Genji or whatever. And that's appealing and comfortable, and is why there's a lot of people who are willing to come back and play classic in that capacity.
Mm-hmm.
But once you take that, and not only, first and foremost, the farther you go forward into the future, whether you get the Moth meta patch or the Goats patch, as they've teased, you're going to lose more and more people because people would have stopped playing by that point. And I think that's going to end up culling big chunks of the existing classic player base. But then also, if you were to go that another step further and like the Moth meta, but Wrecking Ball is here or something like some weird combination of stuff, I feel like it's going to only like compound that sort of issue. So I think there is probably like a sweet spot, so to say, where it's like you have the true classic, which is what we have right now, launch day Overwatch 1. You have that is like the pinnacle of classic Overwatch.
Mm-hmm.
And then you march forward until you get to Overwatch 2. Current day.
Yep.
Somewhere between those 2 points is probably like the sweet spot for a long-term Overwatch classic. And I think finding that sort of like balance of like, how far forward do we go? Do we maybe take some things that existed after that point in time and bring them back because, that'd be beneficial for whatever reason? Stuff like that. Like, I feel like that's going to be the sort of like the sweet spot for figuring out like, where do we settle with classic? A year from now, assuming classic is still a thing that exists in the game and is being played, what does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I probably should check because I actually haven't played him, even though I really should. I think they actually still have Torbjorn at 250 health with 50 armor, don't they? I think.
In classic,
yeah.
Was that not what he was by default?
No, he was 200 health.
You sure about that?
I am sure about that.
I would be very wary that they left that unchanged.
Because I remember when they changed it. So, because they changed it, like, I think a couple patches after his initial rework. I remember them adding the 50 armor, though. Because, like, everyone was like, oh, he literally is just Brigitte now. I remember people saying that.
I would have to go back and check through, like, patch histories.
Yeah.
But I would be skeptical because classic is supposed to be true classic. And, like, they don't have, like, other than the maps being the current versions of those Overwatch 1 maps.
Yeah.
They've recreated everything. Like, I'm skeptical that Torbjorn would have been like, oh, we're just going to give him this extra armor here. Because that wouldn't be classic then.
Yeah, I mean, how much does the armor packs give? I think it's 75, right? Or is it 50?
I think so.
Yeah, because in that case, why would it be 50? It's not like he just has an armor pack on him. I don't know. I'll have to check, or you can check, because I'm gonna have to skedaddle.
I have to check.
I'm gonna have to skedaddle. I'm not gonna be on my PC for the next few days. Yeah, it's. I think that it's also possible, though, that they could be, I think maybe the idea is that they have a new patch every season, like a new patch highlight every season, which would make sense. But at some point, I think it'd be interesting if they at least experimented with that idea of, like, mixing things. Because I know at least, personally, this is just me, I think it would be really funny to have things like Bastion with a maximum of 900 DPS due to his headshots into Goats with Brigitte. There's just something that sounds very funny about that. And so that's the sort of thing I think would be interesting. But yeah, I mean, what's the sense you get? You think this is just going to be a once every season thing? They're just going to have a new classic patch?
I don't think it's even going to be once every season. I don't think we're going to see any classic in season 14. Yeah. A lot of that's because there's the 66 tests coming.
Yeah.
And it's like too short after this first classic test. They already have everything for 14 planned by the time they launch the classic test. Season 15, I think we could very well see another classic thing. I don't know if it'll be seasonal per se, Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if eventually, probably not in the immediate future, but eventually, they do what effectively Fortnite is doing right now, which is they have the new Chapter 6 launching, and then alongside Chapter 6, they're just rerunning Chapter 1, basically. Just all the patches in, like, you know, seasons of Chapter 1, so that both versions of the game, modern Fortnite and the OG Fortnite, just exist simultaneously alongside each other.
Yeah. I mean,
could see Overwatch potentially doing something like that again.
I mean, they would be casting the widest net. That's for sure.
The other big thing is, you know, looking at it from like Blizzard's perspective and like, you know, as a company, they're going to have to find a way to monetize Overwatch Classic. Because like realistically, that's what they care about. And I'm curious what sort of like monetization could possibly come about through Classic, because they're going to have to sooner or later make it where you can use modern skins in Classic.
Oh yeah, I was expecting that.
Yeah. But like beyond that, how are they going to try and structure it in such a way to like maximize profit? Is the other thing that like I'm thinking about in terms of like the future of Classic. Because sure, they can just give us Classic, but like loot box? I don't think loot boxes are coming back.
that would be the funniest way to do it.
It would be hilarious, but it's not gonna happen. Because the other thing you have to consider is it takes dev time to build these Classic patches.
Oh, absolutely.
I can only imagine how much time and effort they spent building just this launch day patch. That was a pretty significant amount of effort with everything they had to revert, because they don't just have that code backed up anywhere.
Right.
They can't just, flip the switch and it's back to day one. They had to rebuild like all of this. And you can see it in a lot of areas. Like Hog's Hook isn't exactly the same. Bastion's like tank mode cannon is just his grenade in terms of like the visual for it. So there's things like that. And it's like for each Classic patch they put in, that will take dev time.
Mm-hmm.
How is that going to impact Overwatch 2 Modern and development of that and new heroes and seasons and whatever? How is it going to impact like maps being designed? Like there's a lot of like factors in here where I'm like curious to see how they handle it and whether there's any sort of like collateral effect from them doing this. Not to say that it's a bad thing or they shouldn't do Classic. I think they should focus on Classic more. Clearly, people love it. But I'm just curious to see the reality we ended getting with Blizzard going forward with this and what they decide is like a worthwhile endeavor in terms of Classic and it being a part of the game.
Yeah, I mean...
Like, do we get... Like, if we have a seasonal Classic patch alongside the Overwatch 2 patch, but it comes at the price of us only getting 2 new heroes a year instead of 3. Is that worth it?
I mean, personally, I would say probably yes.
I'm sure it would vary largely depending on who you ask. A lot of people would be like, sure, make it 0 heroes a year. Just give us only Classic. Yeah, but then there's a lot of other people like myself who'd be like, no. Ditch Classic. Give us the 3 heroes. Like, so yeah, and you got to find the sweet spot between the two. Yeah, and I'm really curious to see how Blizzard handles it.
I'm honestly, I'm not really thinking about like how do they monetize this, because you're right, they're gonna have to figure out something. It's Blizzard. And I don't know. I feel like it's almost I almost feel better about myself that I can't think of anything, because it means I'm not as diabolical as the people who are absolutely going to come up with something. Yeah, it's I don't know. We'll have to see. I agree though. I think there'll be knock-on effects if and when they continue with this, because this is obviously garnered a lot of positive feedback from a major portion of the community, because you're right, basically there's 2 separate player bases, and now if nothing else, this has been like a exercise in like testing your market basically for Blizzard. It's like, okay, this is better than any skin poll or skin survey. They literally went in and said, like, okay, would you be willing to like come back and play the game and spend some money if like we did this? And the answer for many people is yes. So I think this was by all accounts a successful test.
Absolutely.
So that's Overwatch Classic. I don't think I still haven't played any of it with you, and unfortunately I don't think I will be able to because
it's wrapping up next week, right?
Next week. Yeah, I'm
or
good.
If you're listening to this week.
This week, yeah.
Or last week.
Depending on when I get this done. When I get this done. At least I've put in a reference point. It is currently November 27th. So
oh, don't tell them that. They have to think it was recorded live and immediately published.
So yes, that's Overwatch Classic. I love it. He hates it. Kumbaya. Okay, so I guess the last thing we should touch on then is just the idea of 6v6. Like, because I think the idea is they would make Overwatch 2 proper 6v6, is what they're saying.
Yes, that's what they're going to be testing starting season 14.
Yeah.
And again, I see it as very similar to Classic in terms of like, not my like settled thoughts on it yet because we haven't seen it yet, but like it's going to be a very interesting experiment, one which clearly they've sunk a lot of dev time into doing because they're like minorly reworking basically every hero.
They are?
Like, yeah, like a bunch of heroes are getting changed. The Roadhog rework is getting reverted. Reinhardt's losing a Fire Strike. Zarya's getting a bunch of tweaks.
Wait. I didn't hear any of this. Take me through this.
Okay, so they haven't said everything that's going to happen. Roadhog is getting reverted to pre-rework, so he won't have the pig pen.
So he's just the one shot machine again.
He was what he was prior to the rework. Okay. So still Overwatch 2 Hog, but
yeah, that's still the one shot machine.
Rework, yeah. Reinhardt's losing a Fire Strike. He's losing steering control while charging, but you can still cancel the charge.
Okay, that's
they have
fine.
left that in.
Yeah.
Zarya is getting tweaked. I think they're like adjusting her bubbles to be a longer cooldown. I don't remember if they said if they're going to split them into like the ally and the personal one again, or if it's just going to be prolonging the cooldowns on the bubble.
Okay.
Kiriko is going to get her healing buffed to keep up with more tanks.
Okay.
Lifeweaver is going to get his healing buffed. Basically, I think the Overwatch 2 supports are all going to get like minor, like, if not like reworks, then like tweakings happening to like all their kits and stuff, like cooldowns, numbers, everything to better fit the 2 tank system.
Bro, I can't wait for Overwatch Classic to have 5v5.
Oh my god. Outside of that, I don't remember anything specific that they said for adjusting, but like definitely heroes are like more than just, we're going to make like a slight buff, slight whatever. They're like genuinely tweaking heroes for this.
Yeah, I would expect that basically the trend you're going to see is tanks generally nerfed, supports generally buffed. Like,
probably.
And I mean, they got to be careful with that, especially with the tanks, because like, let's be honest, like most tank players are already on psych watch. So, like...
Yeah. Well, now you got that other tank to help back you up.
That's true.
If anything, that's probably a boon.
It is a boon, but, like... you and I both know very well that the last thing we want is, like... They're even weaker? Like...
But there's 2 of them.
There's 2 of them, but, like... He's... Oh... Like... I don't know. To be fair, it's like... We'll have to see. I'm not going to make any assumptions, but if I swear to God, if there's like, if we get in there and it's like, yeah, Wrecking Ball is actually now, he has no shields, and so he just explodes. It's just like he explodes even more than he already does. I don't know. I feel like neither of us will be too thrilled about that, but we'll have to see.
I don't know what else like they're gonna change for it, but I imagine there's gonna be some interesting changes. I'm curious to see how like Mauga and Junker Queen end up working.
Frankly, I don't think they change them that much. I think the thing about Mauga and Junker Queen is they're already functionally off tanks. I think what we're gonna see really changed are the more main tank-ish tanks. Like Reinhardt. And Roadhog is an off tank fundamentally, but they definitely changed him in more of a way that he was more main tank-esque. That's what the rework did. So I think tanks that are kind of blatantly just off tanks that don't have a main tank partner, like Junker Queen and Mauga and honestly Ramatra, yeah, they'll probably not get changed that much. I think it's going to be Reinhardt and Orisa and what has there really been a main tank released since Overwatch 2 came out? Not really.
I don't think so.
No. So Winston. I mean, I don't really think they're going to change Winston much, but I anticipate they're going to change Reinhardt and Orisa probably most, and Roadhog. If this is true, what you're saying, which I believe you. I'm going to be interested to see what they do with my man Sigma, because Sigma is such an interesting case, because Sigma he was never a main tank, but he was never an off tank. He was just the tank. Like he's as Sigma tends to do, he's basically just like a bunch of disjointed shit thrown into a kit, and so he does a lot of things. Yeah, so I wonder what they'll do, because obviously we don't want to recreate double shield. I think they know that as well as we do. We don't want double shield back, which is why I don't think they're going to give Orisa back a shield.
No, I don't think she's going to get anything that substantial.
And I think the lack of shields is probably going to stay pretty much the same. But I'll be interested to see what they do with Sigma, because if nothing else, I feel like the direction they would probably take him is more of like a glass cannon tank, which sounds stupid, but is sort of what he was originally anyways, in many ways, because the grasp was on such a longer cooldown. Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I feel like if I get what I want and they increase the rock damage again, but like maybe at the expense of, I don't know, bit of shield health, I won't complain. So yeah, we'll see. Supports though. Supports. Ooh. I don't know what they would do for... Like, for example, Illari is a weird one, right? Because Illari is the gimmick with Illari is that she can heal from two places at once. So, like, how does that work in a 6v6? Is it literally just, like, they increase the healing so that she can heal both tanks better? Or what? Like, because, like, the problem is that if you increase Illari's healing from both sources too much, whatever she's focusing on will not die. Unless you one-shot it, which, I mean, I don't have a problem with, but, you know, tangential. Like, Illari is an interesting case. So, wow, look at me. I'm remembering Illari's in the game. Illari's an interesting case because it's very easy to make her have an overwhelming amount of healing. So, I don't know. What do you think?
I don't know. I mean, honestly, I'm not that focused on, like, the balance side of things such that I have much thoughts in, like, the individual changes that'll go through.
Okay, that's fair.
Or, like, predicting that.
To be fair, we've always been like that. I've always been more interested in the minutia of the balance. You're just there for the ride, which is something I've always kind of envied. Just the ability to live and let live.
I can only see the forest. You can only see the trees.
Exactly. Yeah. I had no idea about that. I've been very busy being stressed out over school and playing Deep Rock Galactic. So
fair enough.
I'm gonna be honest with you, mate. I haven't watched one of your videos in a fucking long time, and except for the 6v6 announcement and the one going over, or the classic announcement and the one going over Hazard.
Yeah.
So, my news source, I haven't been keeping up with it, because God knows you're the only Overwatch channel I'm still subscribed to. So,
ooh, I feel special.
So yeah, I had no idea. I'm now actually looking forward to this more than I was. I
think it's the 6v6. Just the fact that it's coming back it's going to be interesting because just I find the outcome of the classic to be so interesting. Just the two different camps and how they're just content to like coexist basically, and neither is like visceral against the other. It's like, wow. How often does that happen?
Never.
In this day and age?
Ever. Never. It's impossible, seemingly.
5v5 and 6v6 I don't think will be as pleasant, though, because 6v6, by its very nature, is like a fundamental threat to 5v5. So I think people are going to be more defensive of their respective camp that they fall into. And I'm just curious to see how these camps form. Like, what actually ends up pushing someone into 5v5 versus 6v6. Like, how much are people going to actually enjoy 6v6?
Yeah.
Is it going to be rose-tinted glasses and everyone's like, actually, never mind? Or is it going to be like, oh, this is good, but then is it going to be like only like, are there going to be like pros and cons such that it's like, if you're like a Kiriko main, you love 5v5, and if you're a Reinhardt main, you love 6v6, and it just becomes like split upon like, you know, which heroes you play or which roles you play or like the play style you like dive versus like, you know, bunker or death ball or something like that. Like, I'm curious to see how these like faults end up sort of forming and like where like individual people from different like aspects of the game will end up falling in one versus the other.
Well, I can tell you, I think you are correct that I think generally speaking, support players will like 5v5 more and tank players will like 6v6 more. Which is funny because, like, if you remember originally, all the tank players were like, we get buffed? We don't have to deal with, like, okay, we don't have another, like, tank to help us, but we get buffed? Hell yeah. And we saw how that went. So it's, I think you're onto something. I think supports will generally be more 5v5, tanks will be more 6v6, and the DPS players will be licking lead paint as usual. I say, having primarily played DPS in Overwatch 1. So, I wonder what they'll do with Doomfist. That's not what's coming to mind.
Yeah, I was thinking about that too. I don't think they're reverting him to damage, but
oh my god, if they reverted him to, because like, to be fair, all right, let's do a full circle here. Let's do a full circle here and get a little bit conspiratorial. Maybe the reason Hazard is so similar to Doomfist is because they're gonna make Doomfist again. Like, he's not gonna be a tank anymore.
Maybe.
I don't know. Maybe that's why.
I would be very highly skeptical of that, but maybe.
I'm putting on the tinfoil hat. You know, it's maybe that's why. Maybe like we're getting a tank that's just Doomfist but better, because Doomfist isn't going to be a tank anymore. I mean, I'm huffing copium over here, but you know, it's like I can dream.
God, it'd be so interesting to see that happen, because Doomfist is one of those heroes in modern Overwatch where it's like, there are clearly so many Doomfist players who just love playing Doomfist. And I respect that. But it's weird when he's a tank and there's only one tank per team, And so it's like, that just defines the entire team then, where it's like 50% of matches have a Doomfist in them, it feels like. And it's like, I don't dislike the hero by any means. I can't play him for shit. I am a pro Doomfist, by the way. But like, just the presence he has in Overwatch 2 is so weird, where it's like he's so prominent of a character despite being a tank and there only being one tank per team. He's everywhere all the time. And so like the idea of making him a damage hero again is like, okay, now he only occupies a damage slot, which is like less prominent and important than the tank slot in like a 5v5 context. If it's 6v6, well then that's a very different context entirely on its own. But like the thought of just shifting the copious number of Doomfist mains out of tank and back into damage is like, how is that going to impact the tank role? Because like we're gonna see so many non-Doomfists being played now as tank, and like what sort of like weird knock-on effects is this gonna be?
Okay, so I actually have a few thoughts on that. It's very funny that you bring this up. Yeah, I mean, I can tell you better than most that like the Doomfist community very much split down the middle when he was reworked. Half of them were like swore off ever touching the character again. And the other half were like ride or die. Like, to be fair, the Doomfist community has always been that way. Like before he was a tank, Doomfist mains are ride or die, man. Like,
yeah,
it's like we play a different game from everyone else, and we know it. So like, we just play that game. You know, it's like because old Overwatch 1 Doomfist, there was not a lot of skill, like, overlap. You played Doomfist or you played Overwatch 1 like everyone else does. Like, it was very kind of his own insular kind of character. But you're correct. What's interesting about Doomfist in Overwatch 2 is that he's prominent, but he fucking sucks. It's like, I have not talked to many Doomfist players post Overwatch 2 who are like, yeah, I love this way more. I think I've talked to maybe 2. And it's kind of a Doomfist community is complicated. But you're right, yeah. Despite the fact that he's generally just not terribly good, a lot of people play him. But at the same time, I think you and I both agree, like, he's kind of a failed character. Like, Tank Doomfist? I mean, do you disagree?
Yeah, I think he is kind of a failure in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So, like, changing him back to a DPS would, first of all, probably reunite the community. Which I mean, I kind of don't care either way. I was never terribly active in the Doomfist community. I just kind of played him. I checked out the techs everyone else was doing, and I was like, I can do that too. But that was sort of it. I think what is a more interesting thing to bring up though is like the knock-on effects of like what happens to like the tank player pool then, because so many Doomfist players are ride or die, they're only tank players because Doomfist is in the tank category.
Correct. Yes, I was thinking about that. If Doomfist got shifted to damage, tank queues would plummet even further than they already are.
Yeah. Like, Doomfist players, old Doomfist players, DPS Doomfist players, we all knew our characters sucked ass. It didn't matter though. It's Doomfist. We're playing Doomfist. It's the guy with the gauntlet. They made him sound real scary in the reveal trailer. You know, he had his whole animation for him. It's Doomfist. Like, that's the mindset for a lot of people. And so yeah, if Doomfist went back to the DPS role, a ton of tank players wouldn't play tank anymore. And yeah, we kind of would end up basically with like an even worsening drought problem where like no one wants to do the job, which I think is something they're going to have to navigate if they do decide to permanently go back to 6v6. I don't know. It just doesn't seem sustainable to like, well, I say not sustainable as if, like, tank players haven't continued to play this game despite being fucking miserable for the last 3 years.
Yeah, I mean, look at me.
Yeah, look at you. But, like, I don't know. I feel like they're going to try and address it. We'll have to see if it works, though, because, like, everyone kind of suffers from the fact that no one wants to play tank. You know, people might not want to talk about it or, like, even consciously acknowledge it, but we all suffer from it. Like, you know, everyone who isn't a tank player is waiting much longer in queue times, which everyone hates. So, we'll have to see. Historically, they've not been very good at tackling that problem. So, do I have faith that they'll actually be able to tackle it this time? Not really. But maybe they have something interesting up their sleeve this time. I doubt it. But we'll see. So, yeah. That's 6v6. I'm glad we got a little Doomfist tangent in there. I got to teach everyone the ins and outs of what it means to main Doomfist. It is a cult. I will say that now. It absolutely was and probably still is. So yeah, I mean, I think that's really all we have to cover. Do you have anything else?
I'm curious to see how Wrecking Ball plays in 6v6 here.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, what happens if they just take his shields away?
I don't think they'd do that. I wonder if they'd... I don't think they've said anything about what they're going to do with him yet. But, like, I was thinking... Because he has the adaptive shields that he can now give to allies.
Yeah, he's a main tank properly now.
Yeah, what if they, like, got rid of the sharing of the adaptive shields?
I mean, no one uses it anyways.
Right, but it's funny because 6v6 is the one context where it would make sense to use it because you give those shields to your other tank.
True.
And then what if they take it away in the one context where it's actually useful? I don't know. Maybe they'll take it away. Maybe they won't. I don't know what they're going to do. But either way, I'm excited because Ball absolutely thrived more when he didn't have to be the only tank. Because he can just do his own fun shit, wrecking ass on the enemy team while, you know, the rest of the team plays Overwatch.
I was just going to say, it's like Doomfist, dude.
It is.
Like, the Wrecking Ball players, the video game they're playing is called Wrecking Ball. Like, it's the Doomfist players, the video game they're playing is called Doomfist. It's a different thing. We are playing our own video game. These people can play Blizzard's game Overwatch. We're going to... Listen, I am latched onto the payload and I am spinning around it and I am happy as a clam. It's that simple. Actually, I wonder if they would touch the grapple changes. Now that I'm thinking about spinning around a payload.
Possibly. I could maybe see them reverting the latest like buffs he got on that front where he can like hold for 8 seconds now instead of 6. Maybe they'd nerf his ammo count again back down to 80 instead of 100.
I didn't even notice that they changed that.
Yeah, that was a buff they gave him the same time as the longer grapple. It feels so nice. Oh, he feels so much better after that little change they gave him. Just the grapple duration and ammo pool. It's little buffs, and it feels so much better.
The one that pisses me off is that you respawn with the thing on cooldown. That pisses me off.
That feels bad. But I don't think that's ever going to go away because they deliberately added that to make him worse at stalling in overtime. So
yeah, I guess I understand that. So yeah, Wrecking Ball. Let's see what they do with the hamster. I don't know. What about Ramatra? What do you think they might do to Ramatra? That's kind of the one other thing I'm thinking of, Ramatra, because I don't think they'll do much to JQ or Malga.
Nah, he'll just keep suffering as he always does.
I think it would be funny, though, if they actually did kind of, like, stick to the stupid gimmick of, what was it? Tempo tank? What was the stupid term they
tempo
used?
Tank.
The stupid
tempo tank.
Yeah,
tempo tank. Ramatra is our first tempo tank.
And we've never seen such a thing ever again. It's like, Oh yeah, Mauga's a real tempo tank. The tempo of his guns firing, it's real fast.
You can fire left, or you can fire right.
Yeah.
You can fire both. It's free tempos. What do you mean by this? Tempo tank? What the hell?
So, I said it before. Bastion was a tempo tank. Like, old Bastion.
A tempo tank. He has a ball mode and a mech mode. Like,
it's so stupid. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe, honestly, what I could see them doing is just like making him more extreme on both ends. I don't know. Like that's sort of like what I could see them doing with Ramatra. Just like
honestly, I think Ramatra could be pretty strong. I mean, you think about just like his pummel, the way it just pierces targets. If people are playing, if there's more targets to hit, he's going to gain a lot of benefit from that. He'll charge ult a lot quicker. Annihilation, his ultimate, is just like, it thrives on directly hitting other people. That helps it prolong. With more targets to hit, his ult's going to be better. I'm willing to bet they nerf him in some regard. I mean, like, of course, because he's a tank, he's going to get nerfed somewhat for this. But, like, specifically, his Nemesis punches and his ultimate, I think we're going to see stuff get tweaked to hinder the value there.
Well, to be fair, I've always been of the opinion that there needs to be more incentive for Ramatra to get just stupidly close. Because, like, the problem I've always had with Ramatra is, like, why am I a guy with giant fists who, like, doesn't have to be in their face? Like, really up in their face. Maybe they could go that route, because I've said it before, I'm very much of the opinion that the punch itself should do damage. Like, if the fist hits you, that should do more damage than a shockwave. I think they could maybe do that. Maybe at the expense of, like, maybe he's faster and he has that, but he doesn't have, like, the same durability. We'll see. I don't know. I feel like the trend is gonna be maybe not more damage from. Well, actually, yeah, probably more damage from tanks, because they're gonna have to deal with the other tank. So we'll see. I don't know. You got anything else?
No, I think that's it. I think we really just have to wait and see on the 6v6 front. See what changes get pushed in. See how people respond to it. See how it plays. Yeah,
I mean, honestly, I was not expecting this segment to be nearly as long as it was, because I didn't know there was much to report on. I thought it was just I thought they were still saying, yeah, it's going to be 6v6. That's it. I'm glad you told me about this. I actually am interested now. So yeah, I think that's probably it. If we've got nothing else to talk about, then I think we're good. Are we good?
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Well, in that case, this is a convenient, about almost 2 hours, so that's a solid length. I guess Ness isn't here, so you have to give the closing quote. Give us something, Ian.
Hope Kiriko gets another skin next season.
Said it before and I'll say it again. You run off of Kiriko skins like a Hummer runs off of gasoline. With that said, thanks for being here, everyone. This will be up before the end of the year. I can basically guarantee that. So, hope everyone...
What if this doesn't come out until after the 6v6 test?
Don't even joke about that.
You gotta work on it, man. You gotta get the editing done.
I know. I have to suffer through it. So, I'll get it done. But thanks for watching, everyone. And I guess we'll see you in 2025. See ya.
Yeah, goodbye, everybody. Check out my live streams.
Yeah, check out his live streams.